So, I found some more notes, unfortunately, um, from when I was taking taking notes on Vision Forum's educational audiobook series. Keep in mind that Vision Forum was headed by Douglas Phillips, who, if you read the actual story and description of what happened in the court case filings, and I can say this because he's a public figure, as the owner of a company and as someone who was involved in a court case that didn't have the files sealed or anything. So, he pretty much had an attempted rape case against him, and the judge threw it out because, and this is the judge's decision, which is crazy and should tell you all you need to know about theocrat judges. He threw out the case because the woman went into his room voluntarily. And I think it wasn't even that, maybe. I think it was that he had groomed this woman who was barely above the age of consent, and she had gotten to feel safe with him, and when the attempted rape happened, he didn't exactly get away with it, but, it's something that would definitely have gotten him years and years in prison and any other just court of criminal defense. I don't know why she didn't bring criminal charges against him. I think it was just a civil suit. But this is what got him. This is what led two of the guys that were in his company to leave it, and they left it because of something like moral lapses or something. It was some weak sauce excuse for leaving the company, and they didn't outright say, okay, it's because he had an attempted rape charge. It was because he was having an affair. So basically they put equal weight on the woman that he was trying to rape versus the actual guy that was doing the raping. I mean, this is typical theocrat stuff. So we had the two guys that left the company that were trying to cover for him, and then we've got the rapist that were dictating these notes to me as an impressionable person of the age of 19. So let's see what words of wisdom they have to bestow upon the young version of Joey. Wow, this is ironic. A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. What is a man? What does a man have to do? Well, apparently, by Douglas Phillips' definition, and the people that work for him, you just have to rape women. This is what theism teaches you. This is not what literally anything else will teach you. I mean, the kind of stuff they're teaching you about making films, this is nothing that you couldn't get from somebody else and get it in greater detail and with more experience behind it. And it's not just the experience part, it's just they actually know what they're doing and care about what they're doing versus someone who is really just using it as a tool to push an agenda. So I mean, it's just this. These notes follow a predictable template. They introduce like a sprinkling of stuff about making movies or just about fiction in general, or stuff that they stole from Joseph Conrad. Just something that any beginner rank amateur would know. And then they just follow it up with a ton of trying to push the Christian agenda. Political correctness is silly and is folly. What does this say? Political mind control is strong. Leftism is ridiculous. Ridicule is powerful. Patriarchy can be good. Well, we saw what patriarchy got this guy, which was landing him in court. And the good thing, I guess, was that it got him out of it because of another, like, I don't know what you call him. Just somebody who's willing to excuse literally anything that the accused man in the case was doing wrong. It's like there is nothing that Christians do that they can't get away with in court. I mean, literally, I've seen people get light sentences for murder, and now we're seeing, I don't know if it's an increase, but I keep seeing cases pop up where it's like, so-and-so got accused of rape. And actually had it proved and everything in court, and they still get off with a light sentence. I just can't keep reading this. Unbelief is sin, sin is lawlessness, lawlessness is deadly. So I wonder who's going to be the enforcer of the deadliness of lawlessness there. It's going to be theocrats, and they're going to be the ones cracking down on anybody who dares not to believe in the same things that they do. And the law works on their side, so of course they're going to be pushing for the law. Because what we've seen is the law excuses them whenever they do crimes. But whenever it's, somebody else, they're going to crack down. Keep in mind this is in 2005, so, all these dog whistles and code words for bigotry are still active in the text, and I'm sure they still are going today because they're beating a dead horse. Christendom traditions are not evil. Improper violence is unacceptable, so proper violence is acceptable. Sex is not enjoyable/beneficial outside of marriage. So this is, again, the Christians wanting to crack down on anything that to consenting adults, which they can't even get the consenting part down, are engaging in. Pop culture is disintegrative and futile. What they really mean is civilization. They want to drag us back to the Bronze Age, and they're willing to kill and imprison and abuse whoever they need to get to that goal. Greed is idolatrous. And this is coming from somebody who probably made millions off of his organization before getting into court, and then pretty much getting out of court without so much as a hand slap. I mean, this guy's probably got enough to live off for the rest of his life, just because he was the most extreme out of the other Christians, because, it's a game to them. Who can be the most fundamentalist and extreme? It's the same thing that, that ISIS does. They want to be the most brutal. And that's what we got from Douglas Phillips, who was one of, but not the most. And I'm saying this about a rapist, but not the worst and the most brutal of Christians. There's a few others that are worse than him. I think Mike and Debbie Pearl, Stephen J. Maxwell. Maybe it's Stephen P. Maxwell. I think it's just Steve Maxwell. Anyway, they're both just some of the worst child abusers you can imagine. And if they have committed sex crimes against children, then they've probably gotten away with it and probably will until they're dead. And stuff comes out about it. Yeah, they physically abuse kids and have encouraged others to physically abuse their children. They've been responsible for brainwashing kids and just all of the stuff that spirals out from that. They're really terrible people. Recreational feeling / bonding / dating is retrograde. Usually when I hear retrograde, I think of all the woo pseudoscience people going, Mercury is in retrograde. That's why I missed my bus. Tyranny is a universal evil. And the irony of this is that the same people saying tyranny is evil are very eager to support tyranny when it benefits them. It's like, okay, you guys are the tyrants now. You're not stopping it, you're just encouraging it. Since 1939, films are, I think this word is declining. If you don't have an enemy, you make one. And they've pretty much decided that the only way that your film is going to be good is if it's made by 1939 standards or earlier. So all the evolution of films that have happened for the last 70 years, just forget about it. Those never happened. Just make those movies back then because Christians had a higher population and they had more influence over films. And they had the Hays Code. Let's see. The more mature a Christian is, the more natural the doctrine fits in. So this is about putting Christian doctrine in films. So what they're saying is, you need to have an old geezer directing a movie because he's a Christian preacher, and then that'll make the writing in of the Christian doctrine fit into the movie more naturally. So you need to have somebody who has spent their entire life not making Christian movies, then making Christian movies or writing them. Makes perfect sense. In case it isn't obvious already, Douglas Phillips and Vision Forum are part of a bigger threat called dominionism, a threat to pretty much human civilization. Dominionists' goal, and this is their words exactly, is taking every thought captive. Their goal is literal mind control. I mean, do you realize how absurdly evil these people are? They're also part of a thing called separatism, which, in this context, refers to being separate from the world. In other words, they want to be above the world. They want to be rulers of the world. They want the world to be subject to them. It's like the only way for them to be separate of the world is for them to be controlling it, so that the world cannot control them. Emphasis is on holiness, obedience, foundations, and methodology. We aren't retreating. We're creating a base to attack from. How are these people not defined as terrorists? I don't know how much more I can read this, because honestly it's just more of the same stuff that I've posted about in previous videos, and it just makes me sick to read it. Vision Forum sends out 600,000 catalogs a month. They have just enough to get by. Right, yeah. Unless I'm wrong, Vision Forums was a non-profit organization, and other parts of Vision Forum might not have been for-profit. So we've got a religious organization that somehow just barely has enough to get by, and they're not accountable to the IRS to list their entire list of transactions. So it's like, yeah, that's a real believable thing. The goal is to take over the culture of Hollywood for God, not for Vision Forum. Right, which is why Vision Forum was pushing the exact thing that they're describing. By the way, it still hasn't happened. Christian movies, in spite of everything that PureFlix is trying to tell you, are not doing as well as mainstream Hollywood movies. And by mainstream, I just mean movies. Because really, Christian movies are just like B movies produced by cults. I mean, I would comment on this, but it's like after the initial thing of, hey, here's what a 12-page treatment is, they just go on and on about how you need to be beholden to the Christian ideology for everything that you're doing. It's like this much about movies, and then the rest is all just Christian indoctrination and pushing a Christian agenda. When two unmarried actors kiss, it is wrong. If God's word was the only thing you had to guide you, well, then I'd probably be beating slaves as long as they got up after 2 or 3 days. It's like these people want to take what's normally supposed to be an entertaining or enlightening thing and just turn it into a sermon. Inherently, throughout the medium, the message and the concepts must reflect the character of God in a biblical, spiritual worldview. That's what they want. It's not to produce something that is a good product because they have a vision, and their company is named Vision Forums. Their vision is just the Christian agenda. That's all they care about. It's just, the Trinity is in Genesis 1. No, what they're talking about there is multiple gods. Isaiah mentions Jesus. No, it's talking about a unique incident in the camp where a baby was born, and that was the end of that. Just going on and on and on about different biblical. Disturbing things is not art. I mean, I've got plenty of examples of movies and stuff that are intentionally disturbing, and I would still call them art, so there you go. It's because and the irony here is that the Bible's got plenty of disturbing things. They don't want to address any of them because that would mean a paradigm shift. Mozart was a pagan. I'm looking right here on the Wikipedia page. It says Mozart was raised a Roman Catholic and remained a devout member of the church throughout his life. Civil unions for sodomites, his words, has never been legalized. This is in 2005. This is another case of projection. Michelangelo was a homosexual. The statue was homoerotic. I guess they're talking about David there. It's like they just hate anything that resembles beauty that they haven't put their stamp of approval on. In the 1930s forward, the Christian became the bad guy. No, I'm pretty sure you've always been the bad guy throughout history. Remember the whole witches thing? Then they start to go on and on about Marx, which I'm no fan of, but still, what does this have to do with movies? It's like somehow Hollywood equals Marxism. If you've ever read any of Douglas Phillips' books, like he seems to have this animosity towards psychology and calls it right here a pseudoscience. I'm guessing this is probably because some psychologist said, "You're a rapist." And also probably a psychopath and a sociopath. Douglas Phillips was probably like, you know what? Psychology is bad. You notice I stopped talking about anything related to like film education. I was gonna like I first glanced at this and was like, oh, film notes, because it was with my other film notes, and then I'm like, oh, this is all from Vision Forum, who don't really talk about movies. What they talk about is Christian dominionism and theocracy. Jesus and his followers have serious enemies in neo-Marxism. Yeah, I must have missed that chapter in the Bible about neo-Marxism being an enemy of Jesus. Seriously, this is such a stretch. Don't appease/compromise with the world. You know what? You don't want to be a part of the world or appease or compromise with them. That's good. Because you know those coexist bumper stickers? I'm not a fan of those. And that's not really a rational thing to have on your bumper sticker when they want you dead if you don't believe in their God. You don't want to coexist with the world? That's fine. The rest of the world's going to reject you. And eventually kick you out of it. You know, if it's not your little island hovel, it'll eventually be you turning into ISIS gradually, having fundies creating their own little groups where they can terrorize other people, and you'll get put down. Violence is not okay, especially not when it's from a cult. Christians aren't convicted enough to watch Christian films. Yeah, that's the problem with Christian films. It's with the audience. It's not with the movies themselves. Here's a quote that I copied verbatim. Finding Nemo is sending people to hell. Entertainment ruins America. It is US's God. No fun allowed. Hollywood is dying. By the way, this was written again in 2005, which was a pretty long time ago, and Hollywood seems to be doing just fine. What would be the goal of the new industry? Dominion over cultural hegemony. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Hegemony. Yeah, that's how it is. Gained by wise leaders, decentralized, who are dedicated to obedience and the crown rights of Jesus. Nowhere in there do you mention anything about, like, the U.S. Constitution, or maybe being governed by common sense or reality. No, just cult stuff, man. So here's their creepy goals. Presumptive magistracity. This coming from the guy who couldn't even keep a single company together. Taking over positions as civil officers, elected magistrates, appointed magistrates, leaders of commerce, leaders of military, clergymen. So the clergy is going to take over the clergy? Judicial leaders, cultural leaders. The Bible says we'll inherit positions at our enemies' gates, positions of leadership. Well, you got what you wanted. Everybody hates them, but you got what you wanted. Good luck holding on to that. You must care about the kingdom of God rather than your own career. Again, they don't really care about you or what's going on in your life. What they're caring about is just themselves and their agenda. It's like, live in poverty, hate your family, just as long as we get what we want. Ooh, I like this one. The movement is impossible without God. Well, that's handy, because you're without God, so your movement is impossible. Suggest physical conduct by implying stuff, but don't show it, i.e. the 50s. Why didn't anybody tell Douglas Phillips this? I mean, why didn't Douglas Phillips tell Douglas Phillips this? No touching of people that don't want to touch you back. Especially not if you groom them from when they were a minor. It's just, they want to control everybody's lives and keep them from expressing themselves in any way sexual, unless it's themselves, in which case no rules apply. Christians are being left behind in the battle for hearts and minds. Well, the mind one, I mean, you got lost from the get-go. And the battle for hearts, well, I mean, the whole forcing people to convert thing, that was never really a battle for their hearts. That was just control for subjugation of those people. So really, you haven't ever been winning either one of those fights. It's hard to call somebody that's been totally brainwashed and indoctrinated someone who could be said to have a mind. Destruction of minds. There you go. That's where your cash money is at. So these people are billed as just liberals. I mean, it doesn't say why liberals and not like criticizers of the Old Testament or something, but it says the Bible is inerrant. Liberals say that 2 Kings was written by a committee made up of questionable individuals. Well, that wouldn't be the first book to have done that. And then he concludes, discussing what liberals say is wrong and pointless. So rather than offering a rebuttal of it, he just goes, oh, it's wrong and pointless to discuss what they think, because they're the other, and the other is always wrong. You know, if you swap the name Jesus out with, not Nostradamus, Newton, yeah, then all these cult sayings, they started to make a lot more sense, like, Rasputin is the way, the truth, and the life. He came back from the dead. They tried to kill him. That because they had this page or 2 pages worth of notes that were just going on and on with just all these different cultic stuff. I'm gonna have to end this like now, because otherwise this video is just gonna end on its own. And then they just go on this diatribe about how Christian rock isn't Christian enough. Just proving that even Christians don't like Christian music.